Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. Part of being an accountant, fractional CFO, or really in the tax space is that I always hear one way or another in my discovery calls, in DMs and text messages, I always hear people asking for advice or sharing their experiences around, frankly, bad tax preparers. And I don't mean bad tax preparers in the sense, I'm not trying to generalize, but tax preparers they've had a bad experience with, right? And it doesn't mean that they're not smart. It doesn't mean that they're not savvy. It doesn't mean that they're not technically, qualified to prepare taxes. There's a whole different discussion on that. What I'm talking about are the people who maybe don't have the perceived customer service or the communication that the client wants. And a very big pattern that I see, and this is almost consistent, I honestly don't think I can probably count on one hand the number of scenarios that don't fit this description. So this is how prominent it is. And that is, and you can probably relate to this listening, that a tax preparer doesn't communicate, doesn't teach, doesn't explain, doesn't encourage, coach, advise, or inspire you in any way. And one could argue that's not their job to do that. It just depends on, again, expectations that are set. And that's the tone of today's episode. And that's what I want to go through is setting the right expectations in your business that align with your customer and that you as a customer of another business align expectations with them. I frequently see a misalignment of expectations, and that leads to poor business relationships. It's like the number one reason that business relationships fail or fizzle. Even personal relationships, I think that's a big issue, right? It's communicating your expectations of your partner, of your service provider, of your colleague, whatever it is, of your employee. And setting the right expectations is just so important. And it may seem obvious that you've set expectations, but I'm telling you that you'll know if you really have or not very clearly. It's not something you can assume. It's not implicit. It has to be explicitly stated as these are my expectations. And it's just the only way that you're going to ensure that you have rock solid business relationships. So I'm going to tell you a couple examples or anecdotes of things I've heard, right? So I have a few folks who come to me over this past tax season on a consult, and they'll say something like, my last tax preparer never talked to me at all during tax season. I got a draft of the return on the deadline, no narrative, no video, no explanation, no call. And they just said, sign it, right? And like, Shannon, isn't that that's not right, is it? And here's my answer to that. While that is not the way I run my business, it's not wrong. It's a matter of, well, what service did you purchase? Right? Because if you're asking someone to prepare your return and that was the only expectation is you will prepare my tax return, then didn't they satisfy that expectation? They prepared it. They sent it to you. Sign it. So isn't that the bare minimum of expectation? Yes. But how would they know that you expect more than the bare minimum? Right? You have to have that conversation and be willing to say what your needs are. You have to be willing to say what your needs are. I'm going to just clue you into, if you're working with someone on your taxes or in any capacity, I know accounting obviously firsthand, but this goes for any type of profession. If you're hiring an ads manager, if you're hiring a VA, if you're hiring an admin, an HR person, whatever it is, right? Or a service provider, if you're hiring anybody, and you're not setting the proper expectations of whether it's deliverables, communication, method of communication, frequency of communication, right? Then you're doing everyone a disservice. And it's a two-way street, though. It's not just the provider's job. Now, I believe accountants as a whole, tax preparers as a whole, have got to do a better job at setting expectations. Because if we are going to be crazy busy, right? If we're going to have like hundreds and hundreds of returns to get done, we have to be communicative with people and say, hey, we're working hard. We have a few hundred on our plate. You're in here. I acknowledge you, right? Most of the time, taxpayers, clients just want the acknowledgement that you have their stuff, you're working on it, right? I'm probably over communicative. So if you're a client or a former client of me, I probably spoiled you with over communication because it was the number one complaint I was hearing from past or from clients coming in where my accountant just doesn't communicate with me. So I looked at that and said, okay, communication is high value. So I'm going to send roughly every few weeks kind of a touch base. I'm going to send newsletters to clients. I'm going to send an update on where things kind of stand and what I'm up to. I find, and you can agree with me or disagree with me, that clients, if you're getting your taxes done or if you're getting work done right from an accountant, it's like, I don't care if it's not done. I just want a sign of life. I just want someone to come above ground and go, hey, I got you. It's in my queue. Don't worry. Right. It's going to get done on time. Or it's, hey, I'm going to have to put you on extension because I got a queue in front of you that's just massive. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to it. And you want that communication like in March, right? You want that communication like by April 1st to know, hey, I'm going to go on extension because Shannon didn't get around to me yet. Cool. Right. And then I say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to focus on what I need to tell you to pay with your extension, or what are we going to pay with the extension, and get it so that you don't have to suffer as much for waiting. Right. And that we can take our time filing and getting it right. There's a way you can manage the flow. And I know that you're not listening to this as an accountant, most of you, but there's a way to manage the flow in your business where your client is satisfied just because you set expectations and that you've communicated changes in those expectations proactively. You've communicated changes in expectations proactively where they feel a sense of comfort of, okay, it's being acknowledged, observed. I don't need to follow up. I don't need to wonder where my stuff is. I don't need to wonder what the status is, wonder what this means. I know what the expectations are. And this also goes for like how frequently you get calls with the service provider, how frequently you get to communicate with them, email them, how to check in, how to like, what are the boundaries of the service that you can operate within, right? And what do you get for that? It's so, so, so important. It's not just about like making it what you want to make it and making it super flexible and open, right? You want to define what is the scope of the service that you're offering or that you're buying, right? Depending on what side of the transaction you're on. What is the scope of service? What can I expect in terms of communication? What can I expect in terms of interaction? Who am I going to be interacting with? These are all really good questions to ask in onboarding. And if the service provider, I keep using my profession as accountants, right? If the accountant is not proactively telling you that, and they're like, yeah, I'll update you, da, 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 da. How frequently? And they'll say, oh, I'll just update you whenever. That's fine. But I want to make sure that that expectation is actually delivered, right? So when can I expect to hear from you? Like every couple weeks, every couple days? Like what is the frequency, right? And get that kind of on the table to say that's what the expectation is, right? Hold them to it. Hold them to it. And if things go sideways, right, we all get busy, then also be forgiving. Also realize that we're all human. But it's just so important to communicate these expectations, guys. It's so important. It's the number one thing I'm seeing coming out of tax season. I'm actually talking to a few folks who used to work with me and now work with other providers like all over the place. And they're coming to me and saying, I hired this person and this person didn't communicate, or this person had a delay, or this person did this, did that, the other thing, or this person isn't doing taxes anymore. And I'm going, okay, whether I recommended them or not, right? There's just these other providers that are out there. that I'm getting my clients are coming back to me and saying, "Hey, I'm dissatisfied in one way or another with the person that I'm working with now." And I'm like, "I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna ask you to reflect on expectations that you set with them, expectations they set with you, and where there could be just a misalignment here, where that could actually be a really good person to work with you, but you guys could communicate a bit better in terms of what you guys need." That's usually the resolution to a lot of business relationships. I would not be so quick to judge a provider, judge an accountant, judge anybody that you're working with on traits like that, or behaviors like that, I should say, without first saying, "Hey, where did we go wrong on expectations? Like, where did I misunderstand the expectations that you had, or of yourself or of your service? Where was I probably off? And like, where can we align on this? Or here's my expectations. Here's how you didn't meet them. Can you meet them in the future now that you know what they are?" Right? And if they say, frankly, no, and spoiler alert, if we're talking about accountants, we're people pleasers in general. So we're probably going to say yes. But you have to be really honest. You have to come forward and be really honest about, can you deliver on these expectations I have? And that's not diva-ish. That's not demanding. That's not egotistical. That is you having the best interest you have in keeping that relationship and keeping it strong and giving it a chance to thrive. And that is the recipe for that. If you continue bouncing around to different service providers for a particular area of your business because you're dissatisfied with each one as you go, I would say, did you do everything in your power to set the right expectations and deliver on those expectations and communicate when they weren't being met in real time? If you did all of that, then I say, yeah, then maybe that's not a good fit for you. But put it through the test. Really reflect on it. What could you have done to make that relationship more successful? What could you have done to better communicate, right? And I'm going to challenge you to do that. I'm going to challenge you to find a relationship that went awry, and I'm going to challenge you to see what you could have done better and when, and find a way to implement that in your future interactions. Whether that's asking a new question when you onboard somebody, whether that's, having an onboarding call, whether your service provider arranges one or not, saying, I require all of my service providers to have some type of onboarding call, blah, 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 right? Having some type of requirement or baseline that you need to follow. I think it will give you more confidence. I think it will give you more clarity. And I think it will make your business better step by step. So that is my challenge to you to go out and take action on. Hey there, are you looking for more tax and accounting help for your small business, but tired of the confusing jargon or feeling judged for your questions? This is exactly why we created a completely free Keep What You Earn community centered around this podcast. This community is a space to ask questions, hop on our monthly connection calls, and explore more information about our episodes and our guests. Click on the link in the show notes to join us in this month's call to chat with me and our other guest experts. See you there. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.